Hi, this is Paul with the Oak and Knight, and this is continuing my series on Rally Around the Flag Core Command, Rally Around the Flag, published by Lost Battalion Games. In my earlier videos, I went over what I thought the issues were with the game at a high level in Part 1. In Part 2, we started getting into the rules, including rules changes that, at least I'm proposing, need to be put into effect. And because that first part of Part 2, that first section of Part 2 ran so long, I decided to cut it off and go ahead and put out a Part 2A or Part 2B, depending on how you want to look at it. I'm putting out a Part 2B that's going to continue the discussion, as well as I think get into the scenario book that I think also needs some changes to help make the games more competitive. So without further verbiage, let me go ahead and get started. As you can see, the scenario book is beautiful and echoes the map art as far as what it has on the cover. And let's pop it open and take a look. Gives you a few instructions about setting up the deck and force arrivals and so forth. We've made some modifications to all these and some clarifications, so I think a lot of this is included in my previous videos, so I don't think we have much to say here. The rule book is divided into scenarios that are grouped by day. So essentially you have a day 1 scenario, day 2 scenario, day 3 scenario, and then instructions is how to play it as a campaign game or a 3-day game. And my own personal interest is mostly playing the 3 days, although the day 1 scenario is quite fun. If you don't have a lot of time, the day 1 scenario would be a nice play for, when you have a buddy over and you only have a couple hours to spare. If you're both familiar with the system, I think this could be accomplished certainly in an afternoon and probably with some time left over. So now what I want to do is go over some of the changes, because I have made several changes to the order of arrivals and how all this works. The day 1 scenario is called Buford Stand, and they provide a nice image of the map showing where all the various pieces are to show up according to how they've specified it over here in the setup. Now, one thing I want to bring to your attention is that they got way more stuff over here on the southern side that is supposed to be there. So I think maybe some of that is because it can come in later on day 1. I'm not sure why they did that. But we're going to change that so that it's really just Buford and Heath who are going to be present at the very beginning, with, just as should be the case, Pettigrew is going to join later, and then in the afternoon we're going to have Anderson show up, as well as a whole bunch of other guys. But for the 3rd Corps, the setup is simply the 2 stands for his division. So those 2 stands, even though I think it was the divisional artillery is there just for simplicity, I'd put Harry Heath's artillery there so it's easier to keep track of, and the general himself. So you have 4 pieces starting, all of which are going to start right here. We can start them all deployed on the Cashtown Pass, ready to go here, which is where Buford is going to be deployed. Now, the two stands you see for Buford are the division stand and the horse holder stand. For horse holders, I think it's best simply to automatically have them shadow the unit itself. It's not something you give commands to, although it is something you can have absorb a casualty according to the rules. I think for now we're not going to change that. But this stand 8 here should be right in there with the main part of the stand. I would say those two, the horse holders and the division, do not separate, and it's simply there to denote that the unit is dismounted and available to take a hit if that is required and what you want to do. And over here we can see Reynolds and the 3rd Corps. Reynolds is actually on the map. He does not need his command card to show up in order to move, but the 3rd Corps has special rules. They do need the command corps to show up before they move, and in fact the command card is placed in the deck in a specified location. So one of the things that the Union is going to want to do early on is try to burn some cards so that they can get the 11th Corps to arrive and get them moving. Because right in the beginning, there's nothing they can do. The 3rd Corps is not really, it's there, but it's not there. It's not really there till the 3rd Corps command card shows up. And I think that's positioned in slot 12 of the deck. So again, what I said before, you're going to have Reynolds in command. He's going to have a 7-card draw. You shuffle up the deck the way as described, but you don't put in the prescribed placement cards. So the third core card won't be in there. You pull the 7 cards to populate your hand at the start of the game, and then you put the third core card in place, and I believe it's slot 12. The scenarios then continue by showing you the setup information for the scenario. So all this here maps over to all of the stand numbers you see on the map over here. So it's pretty easy to figure out. But as I say, I think all that should be there is Third Corps Commander A.P. Hill, the 2 Harry Heath's battery, the 4th Brigade from Heath, and the 1st Brigade from Heath. Those are the two stands of infantry you get for Heath. And so all that should be there. Pender and Anderson, they're not there yet. Over here, it's as described, except that I say the horse holders, they're right in there with the main part of Buford. It's an inseparable part. It's just there to show that it hasn't taken a hit yet, and there's penalties if you assign the hit to the horse holders. That's in the rule book. We don't need to cover that here. So the morning arrivals. Yeah, let's see. Now, as I say, I think before you start the game, you have to figure out what event cards you're going to use. Some of them I've put in the optional category. The supplies arrive card, I'm highly recommending that you don't even use it. We've talked about all this before. Here, Third Corps cards. Okay, so this would be the Core Command card for the Third Corps. Okay. And you can see the instructions here as far as how to set up the deck. And you can see A.P. Hill's command card is the 3rd card in the Army Northern Virginia deck. Okay, so that means that you draw the cards into the hand first, and then you position this as the 3rd card. So it will come up quickly, but it's not there immediately. Alrighty, and then same kind of instructions for the Union, and we continue as that. Again, you decide on what event cards you're going to use in your game before you start. And you should talk about this with whoever you're playing with, or of course solitaire, you can decide for yourself. And then it continues on with instructions turn by turn. Again, there's the morning turn, afternoon, and then the evening, telling you how to set things up. Now, I have made changes to this stuff. I don't know if I need to go into the details here, but basically I've tried to have corps come around when they did historically, so that as timing is so important with Gettysburg, especially in the first day, you don't want to have too much variation. So I've made some adjustments. I'll give you an example. For example, here in the afternoon of day 1, for the Union deck, you don't see them putting the 12th Corps. I disagree with this. My understanding is that the 12th Corps actually arrived maybe around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Started seeing it coming into the battle area. That's still afternoon. That's reason one, I don't think this is right. And second, I think the Union absolutely has to have them show up. They have to show up at some point in the afternoon, because they're really, really going to need them. Okay, so I've done things like, instead of having them show up on the evening turn, I'll put them in the afternoon, but I will bury them in the deck so they don't come for a while. So this way you can adjust when units come. Let's say maybe you put it halfway into the deck, so it's not going to come in the early part of the afternoon, but instead will come in the late part of the afternoon. This game does not have turns where you know exactly what time it is, but you still can have things happen at roughly reasonably historical times just by how you seed the deck. And so that's the strategy we use. And this is just showing you the rules as I've put it together. This is my adjustments to the scenario book. And so I go through and I tell you what's different. And I'm going to put all this stuff out on Board Game Geek. I'm going to have to probably make PDF files of this stuff and get it out there. Once I have all these videos done, you guys will be able to find this stuff. You'll be able to read it and kick it around. And really, I would love to hear comments back from you guys, because, I can only do much play testing on my own. And when it's just one guy, doing it by himself, there's only so much I can do, whereas you folks can give me a whole lot more information and insight as far as something that's not working, something that maybe I need to back off of for play balance reasons or whatever. So I'm going to get this out there when the videos are done, and turn you guys loose on it, and keep the cards and letters coming at that point, because I'm certainly, this is where you get to help me, and the more you help me, the better job I can do making this a game that we're all going to have a lot of fun with. Now let's talk about a little more complicated situation where we have Heath supporting the attack against the same First Corps, First Division unit, Anderson coming up, and we have AP Hill back here getting ready to lead the attack. AP Hill activates. He does this thing with the card draws and the events, and then he's getting down to step 4 where he's going to be moving units. Okay, so let's say that he wants to send Anderson forward. That's going to cost 1. He's going to send the artillery forward. We're not going to hang around here and take long distance shots. All right. Now we're going to spend 2 points because the range is, that's the range 1. This guy's range 2. He's got to pay 2 points to activate Heath. Now, notice that Heath is coming in from a different zone. That's going to mean that we're coming in on a different edge by our definition. That is going to trigger opportunities for flanking. Those opportunities aren't always there. It's not automatic just because a guy comes in from a different board, a different edge, but the opportunity is there. And finally, the say AP Hill joins the fun. All right, everybody picks up, and we're going to go to the battle board. Now, the rules as written allow the defender to choose which columns he's going to defend, and a lot of times you're going to want to have as few columns as you want because it means less die rolls, less potential for casualties, and all of that good stuff. But now let's talk about flanking rules. Okay, the rules as written only recognize defensive flanking, or I think they say unmanned columns or something like that. So, for example, the first step in the battle board sequence is that the northerner gets to go ahead and put his guys down, and let's say he decided to use 2 columns, and for whatever reason the South decided to put all their guys in 1 column. There would be a column that had Union troops in it that did not have any Confederates in it. That would trigger the defender flanking rules, which basically amounts to you get to roll the red die. You get to roll the red die for all of the instances where the North is rolling dice. And basically what that does is the North at their option can use that red die to replace any other die that they roll to give them a better chance of hitting and passing morale checks and all of that good stuff. However, the rules do not provide for the flanker to participate in the attack. He's just providing the red die, and that's all he's doing. And I think for a defensive situation, that might be okay. I think, you don't think of defenders as flanking per se. You think of that being more of an offensive activity. However, curiously enough, the rules do not provide for attacker flanking. So let's talk about that. Now, as I said, the Confederates came in from 2 separate board areas, and so that would mean that in my definition it would be that would constitute entering by 2 different edges. When you enter by more than 1 edge, you can use more than 1 column on the battle board unless the defender has protected against it. So the situation we have is the Southerners came in from 2 separate areas. That would mean that they entered via 2 edges into the battle board area. All right, and the question is, does that allow them to flank in and of itself? And the answer to that is no. The Union has to be thin enough. If the North had this situation where they had more troops so that they could cover two columns, then coming in from 2 areas would mean that the South they could match up with both, but they could not use the empty column here. Okay, because they only came in from two edges is a limiting factor. If the defenders defend 2 columns with infantry or dismounted cavalry, then you cannot execute a flanking attack. If they, on the other hand, which is the case I'm demonstrating, the Union deploys like this, the cannon does not prevent flanking. Only infantry or dismounted cavalry prevents flanking. The Southerners entered via two separate areas on two separate edges. Therefore, they can use two columns unless there's infantry or dismounted cavalry into, and there are not. So let's just, for sake of argument, let's say the cannon was actually over here. It wouldn't matter. The South can still do flanking. So when the South deploys, they could do something like this. All right? Oops, oops, oops. So they can do something like this. Now, what does that do? Well, this is a flanking attack because there's only one, infantry defender, no dismounted cavalry. The cannons don't count for this. They are the Southerners. The flanking force is obligated to match up to wherever there are troops. So we have an infantry guy here. We need to have infantry or dismounted cavalry here. We have guns here. Either guns or infantry/cavalry can match up against defending artillery, but attacking artillery can only match up against defending artillery. So essentially, we have two infantry stands and two artillery stands. Then that constitutes matching up. So that means the Southerners have one extra guy. They came in from two areas, and we only have one area suitably defended. That means a flanking attack can occur. All right, so what does this mean? Well, that means that we still use the red die like we would otherwise, and we still bump through all the phases. So in this case, though, everything is going to be getting the benefit of the red die. Everything is going to be getting the benefit of the red die. So when we do the artillery bombardment, it's going to be rolling 3 dice, 2 regular die plus the red die, and taking the best dice combinations to determine if there's hits. When if there's a morale check, we're going to roll 3 dice. Okay, if anytime the Southerners, because of the flanking force, rolls dice, they get to roll the extra red die. Okay, when it's volley fire, they will get to volley with this guy. Unlike in the defender rules that are in the rule book, in this case, since it's offensive flanking, the flanking force will get to attack as well. They will get to shoot in the attacking volley fire phase, and we're going to go ahead and add up the points, including him, come the melee attack. So in this case, they were going to have 8 infantry points plus the red die. If the artillery comes in, that would be another point, and they're going to have the +1. Okay, so that's a whole boatload of points even before we get into cards. All right, let's assume that these were the cards that were played. What we have is a first corps card for the Southerners, so we know there's not going to be any key unit there because these are third corps units. And the North has played this time, instead of having that happy key unit card for the 1st Division, 1st Corps, they got a cavalry card, so that's not going to do it either. We have an assault going in on the attack. We have a skirmish on the defense. There's no matchup with the qualifiers. The select 3 automatically goes into effect because it's not trying to match up against anything. And the Union card is only effective against line, and we have an assault happening. All right, so let's assume we've gotten through all of the volley phases, the volley fire phases, the bombardment phase, and now we're down to the melee phase. How do we do this? All right. The way we do this is, let's count up modifiers. All right. We have, for the Union, they have 4 points. They have the 1-point artillery and the 3-point infantry. We have a leader. We have no key units. I don't see anything else going on. There's no hits on the unit, so there's no modifications for that. It is what it is. On the southern side, we have a 5-figure stand and a 3-figure stand for infantry. That's 8, +1 for artillery. Let's assume that's participating, +1 for leader. That's what we have. On the cards, we have an assault card that's adding 2 to the attacker. So we're going to add 2. On the defense, we have 2. So it's going to be 2. All right, now since this is a flank attack, the Southerners, they roll their 2 regular dice. They roll a red die, and they have a select 3 on their card. And what that means, they actually get to roll. Select 3 means select 3 dice. So what we're going to do is they get to roll 3 regular dice plus the red die. Select 3 plus the red die. So we have 4 dice the Southerners are rolling against 2 for the Union. And the Union is rolling at a 1, 2, 3, 4-point deficit. So let's just roll them and see what happens. And here's what we ended up with. So really bad rolling by the North when they really needed good rolling. On the Southern side, we have a 9. The 2 2s go away. We end up with a 9. Okay? And so the difference is 5. Plus we had 1, 2, 4 more difference on the for when we counted up all the other stuff. So you see that we have a difference of 9. Okay? All right, that's just peachy. We have 9 for this guy's morale. It's going to be a plus 9 because it's to the benefit to the benefit of the attacker, and even with a leadership modifier, that would make that an 8. 8. I don't think there's any way to pass this. The only question is, there's a small chance of not blowing it hugely. So I guess we'll roll that. All right, I rolled a 7 plus 9, 16. That means he blew it by 7. He's got 3 stands. He's got three units in his stand. Since he blew it by more than double or more of the difference as compared to twice the number of figures in the stand, he's going to take 2 hits, and it's an automatic rout. So 2 hits, automatic rout. Now, when artillery routs, you're rolling straight up against their military discipline. He does get the leader, so this 7 becomes an 8. The 7 has become it's a die roll modifier, so we're going to subtract 1. So he needs to roll an 8 or less. He rolled a 7, so he passes. That means he simply retreats with everybody else. If he had blown that morale check, he would be gone. He would be surrendered. He would mark the hit, set him to the side. He would be done for now, at least. Now, that would end this engagement. But let's assume that we had another guy. So now let's change the situation yet again. And we're not going to go through this in quite as much detail, but I want to talk to you about how this would work. Let's assume the Southerners have come in with 3 units, infantry units, along 3 different edges. Okay, the Northerners deployed in 2 columns, so they have successfully done their matching, and they still have a unit left over. Guess what? Because they came in along 3 edges, they are eligible to use 3 columns. All right, so now we have this situation, and so this guy is going to be a flanker. The attacker always has the option of which column to do first. So let's assume that he does the second column. He wants to do his flank attack. And let's assume we had the same result. So these guys now are all running. Let's also assume that it happened in the fire phase. Let's say it happened in the attacker. Let's just say assume it happened in the attacker volley phase, I think it's called. Okay? Yes, the attacker volley phase. All right? This was cleared out. These guys did it before the melee phase. I propose adding a cascading flanking option, whereas these guys, not him, he's got to go too far. These guys can now launch a flank attack on that guy. The guys that are adjacent can go ahead and continue the flank onto the next column. All right, and that happened because this was resolved first. The flank attack happened. the defenders left before the melee phase. All right? Because they left before the melee phase, these guys can join in any phase after the phase in which they cleaned out the column. Which means if you clean out the column in the attacker volley phase, melee is phase 10, so these guys can join this attack in phase 10, because that's the next time that they would get to do something. If they had cleaned out this column in phase 5, which is the artillery bombardment, then these guys would get to do their flank in the attacker volley, which is phase 7, and the melee phase, which is phase 10. If they cleaned out this column during the melee, there would be no flanking because it took too long. So the idea is that the sooner you clean out the column, it can open up opportunities to attack the neighboring columns. Not with these guys, they'd have to go too far. But if this happened, say, in the attacker volley phase, these guys would get to join during the melee phase during the attack over here. So this attack would proceed using all the normal rules, and once it got to phase 10, these guys would join in. Okay? That is cascading flank attack. The other variation, let's say, is it would be a double envelopment. A double envelopment. So let's assume that the Southerners came in from 3 different edges once again, and that we have the defender all defending in one area because they only have 1 infantry unit. So it would do no good to put the artillery someplace else. It has to be, you can only tie up a column with infantry or dismounted cavalry. So they put it all in one. What does that mean? That means that both, since we came in, the Southerners entered via 3 different edges, they would have the option of deploying, as I showed you, and then both these guys would get to do flanking attacks. That would be a double envelopment. They would get to roll 2 red dice. 2 red dice. Before we were rolling 1, now we can roll 2. Double envelopment is very, very bad. So that's how it is. Those are the new options for attacking. You can have regular flanking, you can have a cascading flank attack, and you can have double envelopment. And all of that is going to depend on where you come in on, how many edges you use, how many areas you come in. And you can see on the map where the technical possibilities are going to be that certain areas lend to this more. Certain areas lend to this less. The other thing, just by the way the battle naturally flows and where the opposing forces are likely to be and where are they going to be coming in. The other thing is that, remember, the board number, the tactical density rating, is going to have a big effect because, hey, if you're in the town of Gettysburg, there only is 1 column. No matter what happens, you can't exceed the number of columns on the battle board. Not allowed. There'll be, say, Cemetery Hill is going to be, I think there might be 2 columns. So you would have, yes, there is a chance it would be flanked, but as long as you keep, this would be a position where Cemetery Hill is. It's a number 2 battle board. It's got 2 columns. So on Cemetery Hill, as long as you got 2 infantry or dismounted cavalry units defending, you are flank proof. Okay, barring a cascading flank. All right, so you got 2 decent guys up there, you have a good chance of avoiding all of this. But if you don't, you could have a problem. So this is there might be some play testing needed for this, especially the cascading flank. I think, if there's going to be anything that makes things imbalanced, that would be the one that would do it, I think. But aside from that, I think it's worth a shot. You guys give me some comments and let me know what you think of it, and we can make what adjustments are needed. I could document, say, cascading flank as an optional rule, as an example, or we could just ash can it. So right now I'd say let's put it in and see how it works for us, and we'll go from there. All right, we have gone through the initial stages of what I wanted to say about the game, as well as talked about a lot of changes and things that we're going to do to make this a better game that we're all going to enjoy more. You can look forward to part 3 showing up sometime soon, and once I get that far, I will begin posting the rules and the scenario updates, as well as a player aid card up on Board Game Geek, and so you guys can get a hold of it. But for now, I think we've done enough, and so I'm wishing you a pleasant rest of your day. This is Paul, the Oaken Knight. If you could please consider hitting the subscription button, I'd appreciate it. But for now, have a pleasant day. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.